The bullet missed Gabriel Garrett's heart by 3 inches, but it took his faith in human kindness clean through. He had been 20 years old then, riding with a cattle drive up from Texas, when a man he had shared coffee with that morning put lead in his chest over a card game gone wrong. The scar sat white and puckered above his ribs now, 5 years later, a constant reminder that softness got a man killed in this world. In the saloons of Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Gabriel now made his reputation as a hired gun and ranch hand, men spoke his name with respect tinged with wariness. He never smiled. He never showed mercy. And he sure as hell never let anyone close enough to hurt him again. The summer of 1878 burned hot across the Arkansas River Valley, turning the dusty streets of Fort Smith into corridors of shimmering heat. Gabriel sat in the Prairie Rose Saloon, his back to the wall as always, nursing a whiskey that had long since grown warm in his calloused hand. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and green eyes that had forgotten how to show warmth. His face might have been handsome if not for the hard set of his jaw and the cold calculation that lived behind his gaze. "Garrett," a voice called from across the room. Samuel Monroe, the owner of the Double M Ranch, pushed through the afternoon crowd. "Got a job for you if you are interested." "Decent pay?" Gabriel nodded once, a gesture that passed for conversation in his world. Samuel slid into the chair across from him, mopping sweat from his weathered face. "Need someone to ride out to the Norwood place." Old Thomas Norwood died last month, left his daughter alone out there with just a couple of ranch hands. She is trying to run the operation herself, fool woman. Rustlers have been hitting the smaller spreads, and word is they have got their eyes on Norwood cattle. Her foreman quit last week, said she did not listen to reason. "What is the job?" Gabriel's voice came out rough from disuse. He spoke only when necessary, considering most conversation a waste of breath. "Ride out there. Convince her to sell before she loses everything. I will give her a fair price, better than she will get after the rustlers clean her out. I will pay you $50 just to talk sense into her." Gabriel drained his whiskey. $50 for talking to some stubborn woman seemed easy enough. "Where is the ranch?" "About 8 miles northeast, following the creek road. Cannot miss it. Big white house, red barn. Girl's name is Natalie Norwood." Samuel pushed a $20 gold piece across the table. "Half now, half when you get her to agree." Gabriel pocketed the coin without comment and stood. His gun belt settled comfortably on his hips, the worn leather holsters holding a matched pair of Colt Peacemakers. He had not drawn on a man in anger for over a year, but everyone knew he could, and that knowledge kept most trouble at bay. The ride northeast took him through rolling prairie land that broke into gentle hills covered in oak and hickory. The August sun beat down mercilessly, and Gabriel was grateful for the shade when the creek road ducked under the canopy of cottonwood trees. The Norwood Ranch came into view just as Samuel had described, a well-maintained spread with good fencing and fat cattle grazing in the near pastures. The house stood 2 stories tall, its white paint only slightly weathered, with a deep porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Someone had planted roses along the porch rail, and despite the heat, they bloomed in defiant splashes of red and pink. Gabriel dismounted at the hitching post, noting the silence. No ranch hands visible, no sounds of work being done. That was the first sign of trouble on any spread. He climbed the porch steps, his spurs ringing in the quiet, and knocked on the door frame. "Go away." The voice came from inside, female and sharp as broken glass. "I already told you people I am not selling." "Madam, I am Gabriel Garrett. Samuel Monroe sent me to talk business with you." "Then you can tell Samuel Monroe that I am not interested in his business, his advice, or his charity. My father built this ranch from nothing, and I will be damned before I let it go for less than it is worth." Gabriel felt his jaw tighten. Stubborn woman, just like Samuel had said. "Madam, I am not leaving until we talk. I can stand out here in the sun all day if I have to, but it seems a waste when we could settle this like reasonable people." A long silence followed. Then the door swung open and Gabriel found himself looking at Natalie Norwood. She was not what he expected. Most women he encountered in Fort Smith were saloon girls or shopkeepers' wives, worn down by hard living or softened by town life. Natalie Norwood was neither. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid that hung over one shoulder. Her dress was simple calico, faded from washing, with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms tanned from outdoor work. But it was her face that caught him, the determined set of her chin, the intelligence in her dark blue eyes, and something else, a wariness that he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. "You have 5 minutes," she said, stepping back to let him enter. The house was cooler inside, clean and orderly. Gabriel noted the small touches: wildflowers in a jar on the table, a quilt thrown over the back of a worn sofa, books stacked on a side table. Signs of someone trying to make a home, not just a place to sleep. "Samuel Monroe is worried about the rustling," Gabriel began, staying near the door. "He thinks you would be better off selling before you lose everything." Natalie crossed her arms over her chest. "Samuel Monroe thinks every woman should sell out and let the men handle things. He made my father the same offer 3 times before he died. The answer was no then, and it is no now. Your foreman quit. My foreman was a drunk who thought he could take advantage of a woman alone. I fired him, and he told everyone he quit. There is a difference." Gabriel studied her, looking for the lie, but her eyes met his steadily. "You cannot run a ranch this size alone." "I am not alone. I have 2 good hands still working for me, and I am hiring more." And when the rustlers come, her expression hardened. "Then I will deal with them the same way my father would have. This land is mine, Mr. Garrett. I was born in this house. I learned to ride before I could walk properly. My mother is buried on that hill behind the barn, and my father is beside her. I am not leaving." There was steel in her voice, but Gabriel heard something underneath it, fear perhaps, or determination so fierce it bordered on desperation. He should have walked away then. Should have told Samuel the woman was impossible and collected his money. Instead, he heard himself say, "You are going to get yourself killed." "That is my choice to make, is it not?" She moved to the door, opening it in clear dismissal. "Tell Mr. Monroe I appreciate his concern, but the Norwood Ranch is not for sale, now or ever." Gabriel stepped past her onto the porch, close enough to catch the scent of lavender soap and honest sweat. "You are a fool. Better a fool with my land than a coward with someone else's money." The words hit harder than she could have known. Gabriel looked at her, really looked, and saw the same rigid armor he wore every day. Whatever had put that guard in her eyes, it had cut deep. Without thinking, he said, "The rustlers hit at night, usually in small groups. They will test your defenses first, maybe take a few head from the far pasture. When you do not respond with force, they will come back for more." Natalie's expression shifted, surprise flickering across her features. "Why are you telling me this?" Gabriel settled his hat lower, uncomfortable with the question. "Because dying for pride is still dying. You want to keep this place, you need help. Are you offering?" "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "I am just saying you cannot do it alone." He mounted his horse and turned for Fort Smith, feeling her eyes on his back the whole way down the drive. The ride back seemed longer, the heat more oppressive. Gabriel told himself he had done what he could. The woman was stubborn and proud, and if she lost everything, that was her own fault. He had learned long ago that caring about other people's problems only led to pain. But that night, lying in his rented room above the saloon, he could not shake the memory of her face, the way she had stood in that doorway like she was defending a fortress rather than offering hospitality. He had called her a fool, but there was courage in her foolishness, something he had not seen in a long time. Gabriel rolled over, punching his flat pillow into a different shape. It was not his problem. He would collect the rest of his money from Samuel and forget about Natalie Norwood and her doomed ranch. 3 days later, he was back on the creek road, riding northeast under a sky-threatening rain. He told himself he was only checking, making sure the woman had not done something stupid. He told himself it was none of his business if she had. But his horse seemed to know the way without guidance, and before Gabriel could come up with another excuse, he was looking at the Norwood ranch again. This time, he heard voices as he approached. 2 men stood near the barn, and Natalie was between them, her back straight and her hands clenched at her sides. Gabriel recognized trouble before his horse even stopped. "Madam, we are just saying it does not seem right, working for a woman," one of the men was saying. He was older, maybe 50, with a graying beard and worn chaps. "We signed on with your father, God rest him. Things are different now." "Nothing is different except who signs your pay," Natalie said, her voice tight. "The work is the same, the money is the same." "But a ranch needs a man to run it," the second hand interjected. He was younger, stockier. "No offense, Miss Norwood, but you do not know cattle like your daddy did." Gabriel dismounted, the movement drawing all 3 sets of eyes. He walked forward slowly, his hands relaxed at his sides in a posture that looked casual but could turn deadly in a heartbeat. Every man in the territory knew that stance. "Seems to me," Gabriel said quietly, "that if the lady is paying your wages, she is running the ranch just fine." The older man shifted his weight. "This is not your business, Garrett. I am making it my business." Gabriel stopped a few feet away, his green eyes flat and cold. "You two have something to say about who you work for. You can say it to me." The tension stretched tight as a wire. Then the younger man shook his head. "I did not sign on for this kind of trouble. I am out." He strode to the bunkhouse, emerging minutes later with a bedroll and saddlebags. The older man watched him go, then spit in the dust. "I will finish out the week," he muttered. "Then I am gone too." When they were alone, Natalie turned to Gabriel. "I did not ask for your help." "No, you did not." "So why are you here?" It was a good question, one Gabriel had been asking himself for 3 days. The smart answer was to turn around and leave. Instead, he said, "You need a foreman." "I need ranch hands who will not quit at the first sign of difficulty." "You need both." Gabriel met her eyes. "I will do it. Foreman job. I will hire the hands, set up watches for the rustlers, run the day-to-day operations. You keep the house and the books. We split responsibilities." Natalie stared at him like he had spoken in a foreign language. "Why would you do that?" "Because Samuel Monroe is paying me to convince you to sell, and I do not like being used." It was not the whole truth, but it was truth enough. "You want to prove a woman can run a ranch. I will help you do it, but you have to trust me to make the decisions about security and hiring." "Trust you?" She said it like the words tasted bitter. "I do not even know you." "No, you do not. But you need help and I am offering. Take it or leave it." She looked at him for a long moment, and Gabriel could see her weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, she said, "Room and board plus $30 a month. 40 and I eat with you, not in the bunkhouse. 35 and you eat in the kitchen, not the dining room. Done." They shook hands, her grip firm and calloused from work. Gabriel told himself this was just another job, another way to make money. But as he unsaddled his horse in the barn, he could not ignore the strange sensation in his chest, something that felt almost like anticipation. The first week was hard. Gabriel hired 3 new hands from Fort Smith, men he knew to be reliable if not overly ambitious. He set up a rotation for night watches and moved the herd closer to the ranch house where they could be better protected. He checked fences, inventoried supplies, and worked from dawn until well past dark. Natalie watched him with obvious suspicion, questioning his decisions and double-checking his work. Gabriel bit back his frustration, reminding himself that she had been betrayed before. Trust took time, something he understood better than most. They spoke little beyond what was necessary for ranch business. Gabriel ate his meals in the kitchen as agreed, usually after the hands had finished, sitting alone at the scarred wooden table while Natalie cleaned up from dinner. She moved around him like he was a piece of furniture, neither friendly nor hostile, just distant. It suited Gabriel fine. He had not taken this job to make friends. But on the 8th night, as he sat eating beans and cornbread, Natalie surprised him by pouring 2 cups of coffee and sitting down across from him. "The men you hired are good workers," she said without preamble, "and the watch rotation makes sense. I wanted you to know that." Gabriel grunted acknowledgement around a mouthful of food. "My father used to say that a good foreman was worth his weight in gold." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "He also said that most men would not work for a woman, no matter how much gold you offered." "Your father was probably right. Then why are you here, Mr. Garrett? And do not tell me it is just because you do not like being used. No one takes a job like this out of spite." Gabriel set down his fork, considering his words carefully. The kitchen was quiet except for the ticking of a clock and the distant sound of crickets through the open window. "Your father built something worth keeping. Seems a shame to let it go to waste." "That is still not an answer. It is the only one I have got." Natalie studied him with those dark blue eyes that seemed to see too much. "You do not trust easily, do you? I could say the same about you." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "My father used to say I had his stubborn streak and my mother's common sense." "Unfortunately, the stubborn streak is louder," I noticed. This time her smile reached her eyes, transforming her face. Gabriel felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the armor he had spent 5 years building. He looked away, uncomfortable with the sensation. "My mother died when I was 12, Natalie continued softly. "Fever took her in 3 days. My father never remarried, said he could not imagine loving anyone else. He poured everything into this ranch, into making it successful so I would have security. And then he had a heart attack in the south pasture, alone. One of the hands found him the next morning." "I am sorry," Gabriel said, the words awkward in his mouth. He had not offered condolences to anyone in years. He was 62, not old but not young either. "The doctor said he had probably been having trouble with his heart for months and never told anyone." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "Stubborn streak." Gabriel thought about his own father, dead from whiskey and disappointment when Gabriel was 16. He had not attended the funeral. "Some men do not know how to ask for help." "Is that why you do not?" The question hit like a slap. Gabriel stood abruptly, picking up his plate. "I should check the east fence tomorrow. I think some of the posts are rotting." "Mr. Garrett." Natalie's voice stopped him at the door. "Thank you for staying." He nodded without turning around and escaped into the night. The incident left him rattled. Gabriel prided himself on keeping people at arm's length, on never letting anyone close enough to ask the questions that mattered. But Natalie Norwood seemed to slip past his defenses without even trying, seeing things he thought he had buried deep. He threw himself into work, spending long hours in the saddle checking the herd and riding the fence line. When he had to be near the house, He kept conversations brief and professional. Natalie seemed to understand, or at least she did not push. They fell into a routine, two people orbiting each other carefully, maintaining a distance that felt safe. But Gabriel found himself watching her when he thought she would not notice. The way she moved through her day with quiet competence, feeding the chickens before dawn, working in her garden during the heat of the day, checking the books every evening by lamplight. She never complained, never asked for sympathy. Just kept moving forward with the same determination he had seen that first day on her porch. And slowly, despite his best efforts, he began to admire her. August faded into September, bringing cooler nights and the first hints of autumn. The ranch ran smoothly under Gabriel's management. The cattle were fat and healthy, and no rustlers had appeared. Gabriel should have been satisfied. Instead, he felt increasingly restless. Samuel Monroe appeared one afternoon, riding up to the ranch with a determined expression. Gabriel met him in the yard, blocking his path to the house. "I paid you to convince her to sell," Samuel said without greeting. "I tried. She would not listen." "So you took a job with her instead?" Samuel's face reddened. "That was not part of our agreement, Garrett." "Our agreement was for me to talk to her. I did. She said no. Where I work after that is my business. People are talking in town, saying you have gone soft working for a woman, saying maybe Gabriel Garrett is not as tough as everyone thought." Gabriel felt anger flare hot and immediate. His hand dropped instinctively toward his gun before he caught himself. People can say whatever they want, does not make it true. Then prove it. Walk away from here. Let her fail like she is going to anyway. No, the word hung in the air between them. Samuel shook his head in disgust. "You are a fool, Garrett. That woman is poison. She will ruin you just like she is ruining that ranch. The ranch is doing fine for now, but winter is coming. Rustlers will get desperate, and when they do, when they come here looking for easy pickings, what is she going to do? Stand on her porch with a rifle and her pride." Samuel leaned forward in his saddle. "You cannot protect her forever." "I do not need to protect her forever, just long enough for her to prove she can do this. And then what? You ride off into the sunset and she forgets you ever existed." Samuel laughed, a harsh sound. "I have seen the way you look at her, Garrett. You are already in deeper than you know." Gabriel stepped back as if struck. "Get off this property." "I am going. But remember this conversation when everything falls apart, because it will fall apart. It always does." Samuel wheeled his horse and galloped away, leaving Gabriel standing in the dust with his hands shaking and his heart pounding. He told himself Samuel was wrong, that he was just doing a job, nothing more. But the words burrowed under his skin like splinters. That night, Natalie came out to the porch where Gabriel sat watching the sunset. She carried 2 glasses of lemonade, setting one beside him before taking a seat in the rocking chair her father had built. "I saw Samuel Monroe leaving in a hurry," she said. "Should I be worried? He is angry I did not convince you to sell." "Are you angry?" Gabriel looked at her, really looked. The evening light caught in her hair, turning the auburn strands copper and gold. She had changed from her work dress into something softer, pale blue with lace at the collar. She looked tired but peaceful, like she belonged exactly where she was. "No," he said quietly, "I am not angry. Good, because I could not have done this without you. The ranch, I mean. You saved it, saved me probably. You did not need saving, just help." Natalie smiled. "Is there a difference?" "Yes." Gabriel picked up his lemonade, the glass cool against his palm. "Saving someone means they could not do it themselves. Helping means you believe they can, but sometimes people need support. You would have found a way, even without me." "I am not sure about that," she said softly. "But I am glad I did not have to try." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from pink to purple to deep blue. Gabriel thought about what Samuel had said about being in deeper than he knew. Maybe it was true. Maybe he was already lost. But sitting here with Natalie, feeling something like peace for the first time in 5 years, he could not bring himself to care. "Mr. Garrett," Natalie said suddenly. "Gabriel, can I ask you something personal?" Everything in him wanted to say no, to shut down the conversation before it went somewhere dangerous. But he heard himself say, "You can ask. What happened to you? What made you so afraid to let anyone close?" Gabriel could have lied, should have lied. Instead, he found himself telling her about the cattle drive, about the man who shot him, about waking up in a strange town with a hole in his chest, and the knowledge that trust could kill you. "I thought if I stayed hard, if I never let anyone matter, I would be safe," he finished. "Turns out I was just lonely." Natalie reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. Her fingers were small and warm in his calloused palm. "I understand. After my mother died, I thought if I could just be strong enough, tough enough, nothing would ever hurt me again. But being strong and being alone are not the same thing." Gabriel looked down at their joined hands, feeling something break open inside him. "I do not know how to be anything else. Then maybe we can learn together." He should have pulled away. Should have made an excuse and left before he did something stupid. But Gabriel Garrett, who had spent 5 years convinced that tenderness was foolish, found himself holding on. The moment was shattered by the sound of gunfire. Gabriel was on his feet instantly, his gun in his hand before his mind had fully processed the sound. Natalie stood beside him, her face pale but calm. "The cattle," she said. They ran for the barn, Gabriel shouting for the hands. 3 men emerged from the bunkhouse, pulling on boots and strapping on gun belts. Gabriel grabbed a rifle and swung onto his horse bareback, not waiting for a saddle. "Tom, you and Jake stay here and guard the house," he ordered. "William with me." They rode hard toward the sound of cattle lowing in distress. The moon was almost full, providing enough light to see the herd milling in confusion. 4 men on horseback were cutting out steers from the edge of the group, whooping and firing shots to keep the animals moving. Gabriel did not think. He raised his rifle and fired over the rustlers' heads, the crack of the shot echoing across the pasture. The rustlers wheeled their horses, and for a moment, Gabriel thought they would fight. Then William fired as well, and the rustlers decided discretion was the better part of valor. They abandoned the steers and galloped into the darkness. Gabriel and William chased them to the property line, then stopped. No point pursuing men into unknown territory in the dark. They gathered the scattered steers and drove them back to the main herd, checking for injuries. "Anyone hurt?" Gabriel asked as they rode back to the ranch house. "Do not think so. They did not get far before you stopped them." William, a quiet man in his 30s, gave Gabriel an approving nod. Quick thinking. Dawn was breaking as they reached the barn. Natalie stood in the yard, still dressed in her blue dress, a rifle cradled in her arms. Relief flooded her face when she saw them. "Everyone all right?" she called. "Fine. They ran off before we could get a good look at them." Gabriel dismounted, suddenly aware of how his heart was racing. "But they will be back. Now they know our defenses. Then we will be ready," Natalie said firmly. Gabriel wanted to argue, to tell her this proved she should sell, that the danger was real. But he looked at her standing there in the dawn light, brave and determined, and he knew she would never back down. And he realized he did not want her to. "We need more men," he said instead. "At least 2 more for night watches. And we should move the herd even closer, split them into smaller groups so they are easier to defend. Do whatever you think is necessary. I trust you." The words hit Gabriel harder than he expected. Trust. She trusted him. When had that happened? The next weeks blurred together. Gabriel hired 2 more hands, both young but willing to work hard. He reorganized the ranch operations, creating overlapping watches that kept eyes on the herd around the clock. The rustlers probed their defenses twice more, but each time Gabriel and the hands drove them off before they could take any cattle. And through it all, Gabriel found himself drawn increasingly to Natalie. She started joining him on his morning rides, checking the cattle and riding fence. They would leave before dawn, just the two of them, and watch the sun come up over the Arkansas hills. She told him about her childhood, about learning to rope and ride from her father, about her dreams of making the ranch not just successful but legendary. Gabriel found himself talking too, sharing stories he had never told anyone. About his mother, who had died when he was young. About his dreams of having his own spread someday, a place where he could put down roots. About the loneliness that had followed him like a shadow for 5 years. "You do not seem lonely anymore," Natalie observed one morning as they sat their horses on a hilltop, looking down at the ranch below. "No," Gabriel agreed. "I do not. Because of the ranch, because of you." The words were out before he could stop them. Gabriel tensed, waiting for her to laugh or pull away. Instead, Natalie guided her horse closer until her knee touched his. "I am glad you are here," she said softly. "Not just because you are a good foreman, because I like who I am when I am with you. I like not being alone." Gabriel turned to look at her, and in that moment, with the sunrise painting her face gold and her eyes soft with emotion, he felt the last of his walls crumble. He had been so certain that tenderness was foolish, that caring made you weak. But looking at Natalie, he understood that the opposite was true. It took more courage to open your heart than to keep it closed. "Natalie," he said, his voice rough, "I am not good at this. I do not know how to be gentle or romantic or any of those things women want. I do not need you to be anything but yourself. I am afraid I will disappoint you, that I will fail you somehow." She reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. "Gabriel Garrett, you are the most honest, hardworking, loyal man I have ever known. You have never disappointed me, not once." "I am falling in love with you," Gabriel said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside, "and it terrifies me." Natalie smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good, because I am falling in love with you too, and I am terrified. So we can be terrified together." Gabriel leaned across his saddle and kissed her. It was awkward with the horses between them, but Natalie laughed against his mouth, and somehow that made it perfect. When they pulled apart, Gabriel felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in years. "We should head back," Natalie said, but she did not move. "We should," Gabriel agreed, but he did not move either. They sat there, hands linked, until the sun was fully up and the ranch hands would start wondering where they were. Then they rode back together, and Gabriel knew that his life had changed in some fundamental way. The loneliness was gone, replaced by something bright and terrifying and wonderful. The courtship that followed was conducted in stolen moments between ranch work. Gabriel would find wildflowers on his pillow when he came in from night watch. Natalie would slip notes into his saddle bags, little messages that made him smile when he found them hours later. They sat together on the porch in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. The ranch hands noticed, of course. Tom, the oldest of the crew, pulled Gabriel aside one day. "You planning to marry that woman?" he asked bluntly. Gabriel had been thinking about little else. "Yes, if she will have me, then you better do it right. A woman like Miss Norwood deserves a proper proposal, not some half-hearted mumbling in the barn." Gabriel had no idea what a proper proposal looked like. He had never imagined himself as a marrying man, but for Natalie, he wanted to try. He rode into Fort Smith the next week, ostensibly to pick up supplies. But his first stop was a small jewelry shop run by a German immigrant named Klaus. "I need a ring," Gabriel said, feeling foolish. Klaus looked at him with knowing eyes. "For the Norwood woman, yes. I heard you were working for her." "Yes, for her." Klaus brought out a tray of rings, simple bands, and elaborate settings. Gabriel's eyes were drawn to one in particular, a gold band with a small sapphire set in the center. "That is a good choice," Klaus said. "The sapphire is the color of loyalty and love. It suits a man like you." Gabriel bought the ring, along with a new shirt and string tie. He felt ridiculous making such preparations, but Tom was right. Natalie deserved the effort. He proposed on a Sunday evening in October, when the leaves were turning gold and red, and the air had the first crisp hint of winter. He saddled 2 horses and asked Natalie to ride out with him to the hilltop where they had first kissed. "What is this about?" she asked, smiling at the mysterious invitation. "You will see." They rode in comfortable silence, and Gabriel used the time to rehearse what he wanted to say. But when they reached the hilltop and dismounted, all his careful words vanished. "Natalie, I am not good with speeches," he began. "Gabriel, what is going on?" He dropped to one knee in the grass, pulling the ring from his pocket. "5 months ago, I thought tenderness was foolish. I thought caring about anyone was a weakness that would get me killed. Then I met you, and you showed me I was wrong about everything. You showed me that being strong means being brave enough to be vulnerable, that loving someone does not make you weak, it makes you whole." Tears were streaming down Natalie's face, but she was smiling. "I love you," Gabriel continued. "I love your courage and your stubbornness, and the way you see the best in people even when they cannot see it in themselves. I want to spend my life helping you build this ranch into something extraordinary. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Natalie said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Gabriel, yes." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. They stood there on the hilltop as the sun set, holding each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. "I have a confession," Natalie said against his chest. "What is that?" "I fell in love with you the first day you came back. When you faced down those ranch hands, I knew you were the one I had been waiting for." Gabriel laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. "I fell in love with you the day I met you, standing in your doorway like a warrior defending her castle. I just was not ready to admit it yet." "Well, I am glad you finally figured it out." "Me too." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Fort Smith. Natalie wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper and smelling of lavender. Gabriel wore his new shirt and tie, and tried not to look as nervous as he felt. The wedding was small, just a few ranch hands and some neighbors from surrounding spreads. Samuel Monroe did not attend, still angry about losing the Norwood ranch. But his absence did not diminish the day. Gabriel spoke his vows in a clear voice, promising to love and honor Natalie for as long as he lived. When the preacher said he could kiss his bride, Gabriel took her face in his hands and kissed her with all the tenderness he had spent years denying. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, a potluck affair with tables set up in the yard. The hands had strung lanterns from the trees, and someone brought a fiddle. As the evening wore on and the dancing started, Gabriel found himself standing on the porch watching his wife laugh and spin in the lantern light. Tom joined him, nursing a glass of whiskey. "You did good, Garrett." "I know. She's going to make your life hell sometimes. Strong women do that," Gabriel smiled. "I am looking forward to it. Never thought I would see the day when Gabriel Garrett settled down." Tom raised his glass. "To love making fools of us all." "To foolishness," Gabriel agreed, and they drank. Later, when the guests had gone home and the lanterns were extinguished, Gabriel carried Natalie across the threshold of the house that was now theirs. She laughed and kissed him, and Gabriel thought about how much his life had changed in just a few short months. "I love you, Mrs. Garrett," he said as he set her down in the bedroom. "I love you, Mr. Garrett." Natalie began unbuttoning his shirt. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how much." Their first year of marriage was not easy. The ranch required constant work, and there were setbacks. A winter storm killed several head of cattle. One of the hands quit and had to be replaced. The rustlers made one more attempt in March, but Gabriel and his men drove them off permanently, wounding two of the thieves badly enough that the gang decided the Norwood ranch was more trouble than it was worth. Through it all, Gabriel and Natalie faced each challenge together. They argued sometimes, passionate disagreements about ranch management or money or 100 other small things. But they always made up, and Gabriel learned that fighting with someone you loved was different from the violence he had known before. It was safe. She would not abandon him because he disagreed with her, and he would not hurt her because she made him angry. The tenderness between them grew. Gabriel found himself doing small things to make Natalie smile, bringing her coffee in the morning, rubbing her feet after a long day, leaving love notes where she would find them. Acts that would have seemed foolish before now felt natural and right. And Natalie responded in kind, mending his shirts with extra care, making his favorite meals, listening when he needed to talk about his past. She helped him work through the anger and pain he had carried for so long, never judging, just offering love and patience. On their first anniversary, Gabriel surprised her with a gift. He had spent months working on it in secret, using every spare moment to bring his vision to life. "Close your eyes," he said, leading her out of the house. "Gabriel, what did you do? Just trust me." He guided her to the barn, then around to the back where a new structure stood. "Okay, open them," Natalie gasped. Gabriel had built a greenhouse, a beautiful structure with glass panes and a wood frame. Inside, he had planted roses, the same kind that grew on her porch rail. "You said your mother planted those roses," Gabriel explained. "I thought maybe you would like to have more, to remember her by." Natalie was crying, but she was smiling too. "Gabriel, this is the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me. You showed me it is not foolish to care, to be tender, to love. You taught me that those things are the most important wisdom a man can have. This is just me trying to show you what that means to me." She kissed him there among the roses, and Gabriel thought about the man he had been, hard and closed off and convinced he had all the answers. That man seemed like a stranger now. As the months passed, their love deepened. Gabriel found joy in the everyday moments, in working beside Natalie, in sitting with her on the porch in the evenings, in the feel of her body against his at night. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long was just a memory now. In the spring of their second year together, Natalie told him she was pregnant. Gabriel was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He knew nothing about being a father, and his own father had been a terrible example. But Natalie assured him that he would be wonderful, and he tried to believe her. The pregnancy was hard on Natalie, especially in the summer heat. Gabriel took over more of the ranch work, insisting she rest. They hired another hand to help with the increased workload. Gabriel was constantly worried, checking on Natalie a dozen times a day, driving her to distraction with his concern. "Gabriel, I am pregnant, not dying," she said one afternoon as he tried to stop her from feeding the chickens. "I know, but what if something happens? Then we will deal with it together, like we deal with everything." She took his face in her hands. "I need you to trust that I know my own limits." Gabriel nodded, but he could not shake the fear. He had found happiness, real happiness, for the first time in his adult life. The thought of losing it terrified him more than any gunfight ever had. The baby came on a cold November night. The doctor from Fort Smith arrived just in time, and Gabriel paced the porch while Natalie labored upstairs. Tom sat with him, offering silent support. "It will be fine," Tom said. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Not my woman, not my baby. Especially your woman and your baby. That is one strong lady in there. She is not going to let anything happen to that child." Hours passed, each one an eternity. Gabriel prayed, something he had not done since he was a child. He made bargains with God, promising anything if Natalie and the baby would be all right. Finally, as the sun was rising, a baby's cry split the air. Gabriel was up the stairs before the doctor could come out, bursting into the bedroom. Natalie lay in bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. "Gabriel, come meet your son." Gabriel approached slowly, his legs shaking. He looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets and felt something shift in his chest. This was his son, his child. "He is beautiful," Gabriel said, his voice cracking. "He has your eyes." Natalie held the baby out. "Do you want to hold him?" Gabriel took his son carefully, terrified of dropping him or holding him wrong. But the baby settled into his arms like he belonged there. Gabriel looked at the small, perfect face and felt tears streaming down his cheeks. "What should we name him?" Natalie asked. Gabriel had been thinking about this. "Thomas, after your father," Natalie smiled. "Thomas Gabriel Garrett, it is perfect." Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed, holding his son and his wife's hand, and felt complete in a way he never had before. All his life he had been running from love, convinced it would destroy him. But sitting here with his family, he understood that love had not destroyed him. It had remade him into someone better. The years that followed were filled with hard work and deep contentment. Young Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy who followed Gabriel everywhere, learning the ranch business from the time he could walk. 2 years after Thomas was born, Natalie gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, and 2 years after that, another son named Michael. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Word spread that the Garrett Ranch, as it was now called, was well run and successful. Other ranchers sought Gabriel's advice, and Natalie's business acumen became legendary throughout the territory. But more than the success, more than the prosperity, it was the love that defined their lives. Gabriel made sure Natalie knew every day how much he cherished her. He never let a morning pass without kissing her, never let a disagreement fester into resentment. And Natalie did the same for him, offering support and understanding and a love that never wavered. On quiet evenings, when the children were in bed and the work was done, Gabriel would sit on the porch with Natalie, holding her hand and watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Natalie asked one evening. "Giving up your life as a gunfighter to be a rancher?" Gabriel thought about the man he had been, hard and lonely and convinced that tenderness was weakness. Then he looked at his wife, at the house full of children, at the land they had worked so hard to build. "Not for a second," he said. "You taught me that the things I thought were foolish, the gentleness and tenderness and love, those are actually the greatest wisdom a man can have. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you." "We owe it to each other," Natalie corrected. "I was just as lost as you were, just as scared. We saved each other. Then I am the luckiest man alive, and I am the luckiest woman." They sat in comfortable silence, and Gabriel thought about how far they had come, about trust and courage and the risk of opening your heart. He had been so certain that protecting himself was the smart choice, that staying closed off would keep him safe. But safety was not the same as living, and he had spent too many years just existing. Natalie had shown him what it meant to truly live, to be vulnerable and brave and foolishly in love. And in doing so, she had given him everything he never knew he needed. As the years passed, the Garrett Ranch became one of the most successful operations in Arkansas. Gabriel's reputation changed from dangerous gunfighter to respected rancher and family man. People who had once feared him now sought his friendship. And Gabriel, who had spent so much of his life alone, found himself surrounded by community and connection. Thomas grew up to be a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Gabriel aged. Sarah married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who loved her fiercely. Michael decided to become a lawyer, moving to Little Rock but returning home often. Through it all, Gabriel and Natalie remained the center of the family, their love the foundation on which everything else was built. They grew old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies slowing down but their affection never diminishing. On Gabriel's 50th birthday, the family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter. Gabriel sat in his chair on the porch, watching the chaos with contentment. Natalie joined him, moving a little slower now but still beautiful to Gabriel's eyes. She handed him a wrapped package. "What is this?" he asked. "Just open it." Inside was a book, leather-bound and expensive. Gabriel opened it carefully and found page after page of photographs and notes, a history of their life together. Pictures from their wedding, drawings the children had made, pressed flowers from their anniversary celebrations. It was their story, preserved and cherished. "You did this?" Gabriel asked, his voice thick with emotion. "With Sarah's help. I wanted you to have something that showed you how extraordinary your life has been, how much you have meant to all of us." Gabriel flipped through the pages, seeing his life reflected back at him. The scared young man who thought tenderness was foolish had been replaced by family and love and belonging. He had been so wrong about so many things. "I do not deserve this," he said. "I do not deserve any of it." "Yes, you do." Natalie took his hand, her fingers still fitting perfectly into his. "You are a good man, Gabriel Garrett. You always were, even when you did not believe it yourself. I am so proud of the life we have built together." "I love you," Gabriel said. "More than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are my greatest wisdom, Natalie. Everything good in my life comes from you, and everything good in mine comes from you," she replied. "We were made for each other, you and I, two lost souls who found their way home." As the sun set and their family gathered around them, Gabriel thought about the journey that had brought him here. About a scared young man who learned that protecting your heart was not the same as living. About a woman who was brave enough to take a chance on a man who had forgotten how to love. About the slow, beautiful process of learning to be tender, to be vulnerable, to be fully and completely human. The things he had once thought foolish had become his greatest treasures. The softness he had scorned was now his strength. And the love he had feared would destroy him had instead made him whole. Gabriel Garrett, the cowboy who thought tenderness was foolish, had learned that foolish was actually the wisest thing a person could be. Because it took a fool to risk everything for love, to open your heart when the world told you to close it, to believe that connection was worth the pain it might bring. And Gabriel had been that kind of fool, the best kind, the kind that led to a life rich with meaning and full of joy. As night fell over the Arkansas hills and his family laughed and talked around him, Gabriel held Natalie's hand and felt at peace. He had everything he needed right here, a life beyond anything he could have imagined on that hot August day when he first rode up to the Norwood Ranch. The journey from that hard, closed-off gunfighter to this contented grandfather had been long and difficult. But every step had been worth it. Every risk, Every moment of vulnerability, every terrifying leap into the unknown had led him here, to this perfect evening surrounded by love. Gabriel leaned over and kissed his wife, still feeling that spark of connection that had drawn them together all those years ago. And he thanked whatever force in the universe had been kind enough to send Natalie Norwood into his life, to teach him that tenderness was not weakness but strength, that love was not foolish but wise, and that opening your heart was not the end but the beginning of everything that mattered. Years continued to pass, each one a gift. Gabriel and Natalie grew older gracefully, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They sat together in the greenhouse Gabriel had built, surrounded by roses and memories, and talked about their life with satisfaction and joy. And when Gabriel's time finally came, many years later, he died as he had lived his later years, surrounded by love, holding Natalie's hand, content in the knowledge that his life had meant something, that he had mattered, that he had loved and been loved in return. The cowboy who thought tenderness was foolish had learned his greatest wisdom, that the foolish things, the tender things, the vulnerable things, those were what made life worth living. And in learning that lesson, he had found not just happiness but peace, not just success but purpose, not just a wife but a soulmate, not just a ranch but a home. Gabriel Garrett's legacy lived on in his children and grandchildren, in the ranch that still bore his name, and in the love story that people told for generations. The story of a hard man who learned to be soft, a closed heart that learned to open, and a love that transformed two lonely people into something greater than the sum of their parts. It was a good story, a true story, and it proved what Natalie had always known, that the greatest wisdom comes not from protecting yourself but from risking everything for love. That tenderness is not foolish but brave. And that the best life is not the safest one but the one lived fully, openly, and foolishly in love. The end.